Welcome to Extinction Rebellion Cape Town. We want to tell you who we are and how you can get involved. We used to start our Extinction Rebellion talks with much scientific evidence for the urgency of acting on climate change. But we have found that what motivates people to step away from their busy and stressed lives into activism is not more scary facts, but is a clearer picture of what we can do together. If you want more information from the climate scientists, we will happily share that with you after our talk together. Extinction Rebellion was formed in 2018 in the UK. It started with 15 people who had researched the way to achieve radical social change. The answer they found was civil disobedience. In October of that year, they declared themselves to be an open rebellion against the UK government. In April 2019, the first rebellion began. Blockades of London bridges propelled the group into spotlight, and since then, the group has been growing rapidly. 1,127 Extinction Rebellion groups have been established in 72 countries across the globe. The movement is active in every single continent barring Antarctica. There is one group in South Africa, 8 local groups. One of those is Extinction Rebellion Cape Town. So you're probably still wondering what Extinction Rebellion is actually about. What do we do and what do we stand for? Extinction Rebellion is a global movement that uses non-violent civil disobedience in an attempt to halt mass extinction and minimize the risk of social collapse. It is a decentralized mass movement of concerned citizens. It is open to anyone who takes action in a non-violent way, actively mitigating for power and standing by the action that they have taken. Each Extinction Rebellion group has a different area of focus and way of working depending on the people who've joined the group and the skills that they bring. Extinction Rebellion Cape Town definitely holds to the value of non-violence. We are currently small in number, so we can't mass mobilize huge groups of people. That's why we use creative, colorful, and clever actions to try to amplify climate scientists' warnings. We find that these visual and graphic techniques can really speak to people's hearts and connect with their motivations in ways that maybe stats and numbers can't do. We also really focus on creating actions that catch the attention of media so that we can see increased climate coverage in media and social media. Very important for us is to partner with other activist groups, both in the environmental movement and the broader justice movement, both locally, nationally, and internationally. We want 3 things. The first is for the government and media to tell the truth about the climate and ecological emergency and work with other institutions to communicate the urgency for change. The second demand is for the government to act now, to halt biodiversity loss and reduce greenhouse gases to net zero by 2025. And the third demand is for government to create and be led by the decisions of a citizens' assembly on climate and ecological justice. And this speaks to a more participatory democracy model than what we have at the moment. Each XR group translates those broad demands into a local and specific response. How they do that is really dependent on the skills, expertise, experience, and passions of the various people who join the group. In Cape Town, our current strength is to take a concept that's a bit abstract and make it visual by using art so that it influences people's thinking and emotions around climate change, biodiversity loss, and ecological justice. Let's share some examples of what this artivism has looked like. Here we are outside the CTICC during Africa Oil Week last year, where heads of state and energy ministers from various parts of Africa joined to look together at oil. As you can see, we were pouring blood over us as a demonstration of Antonio Guterres' quote that says fossil fuels are killing us. Also in 2022, we were outside the Africa Energy Week that took place at the waterfront. Again, heads of state from various parts of Africa who were coming together not to discuss renewables, but actually how they could deepen their commitment to oil and gas. And we had a message for them that actually spoke in contradiction to what our energy minister was saying at the time. Last year, during COP27, we put together some actions that could create a visual impact of what was taking place in the international meeting around climate change. So here we are depicting big oil, big gas, big government, having this party oblivious or choosing to ignore the fact that the sea level is literally like rising above their ankles, carrying on with business as usual, leading to the death of our planet, but focused on their own profits. And this helped our local media to take photos of us and write more in-depth stories about these big decisions that were taking place at the global conference. Here we are critiquing the idea that carbon capture and storage is the solution that we need to allow us to carry on burning fossil fuels, with the idea that we just suck the carbon out of the atmosphere afterwards. So we were sort of comparing carbon capture and storage to unicorn technology, this magical thinking, and we were highlighting the message that we actually need to reduce emissions. There's no magic that's going to save us. And this again was an issue that was being discussed at COP27 that we wanted to highlight. Our demands to tell the truth and act now don't stop just at governments, but we also focus on holding corporates to account. Standard Bank is considering investing in the East African crude oil pipeline across Uganda and Tanzania that will not only threaten water resources and pristine biodiverse land, but is already causing evictions of local indigenous people from their land. So we joined with activists from East Africa to call on Standard Bank to reconsider investing in this oil pipeline. And you can see here, our XR team built a mini pipeline through their head office in town. Here's another action aimed at Standard Bank outside one of their branches with our cleaning equipment, mops and vacuum cleaners, calling them to clean up their act in relation to this East African crude oil pipeline and to stop investing in fossil fuels. In 2021 and since then, we have joined with other activist groups to hold Shell accountable for their decision to conduct seismic blasting around the coasts of South Africa. Together with other activist groups, we helped mobilize protests outside many Shell service stations, which offered this public support for the activist groups that were taking Shell and the government to court over the decision to allow seismic blasting along the Wild Coast. We also held various protests outside media houses and corporations, calling on them to tell the truth in their reporting, highlighting the climate crisis and the urgency for action that is required. Extinction Rebellion Cape Town is still quite small, so in order for us to have greater impact on governments and corporations and society in general, it's crucial that we collaborate with other environmental groups. Twice a year, we work with other groups to organize a climate march through the streets of Cape Town. Youth activists, environmental groups, and other social justice movements participate. We hope to show that the current system is causing poverty and ocean pollution, global warming and biodiversity loss, exploitation of people and the extraction of the land. We need to change the system and find solutions that solve for all these problems. Earlier this year, we joined with other environmental groups to protest the Russian research vessel that was heading to Antarctica with the purpose of conducting seismic blasting along the seabed in order to search for fossil fuels. We called on our government, which is a signatory to the Antarctic Treaty System, to protect the Antarctic by not allowing shipping vessels intent on fossil fuel exploration to use our ports. Our artism also includes performance protest. The Red Rebels are hard to describe because they aren't like anything you've seen before. They symbolize the deep consciousness of Earth, or perhaps the spirit of all creatures. Come out during protests and use their facial expressions and collective movement to show deep emotion, anger, grief, sorrow, power. They are silent, do not talk, only communicate through their movements. There are, in fact, ordinary people, not professional performers, who dress in these red robes and work together to create very emotive scenes. We use the prophets of doom to protest when we're specifically focusing on oil and gas. The word itself is quite clever. Prophets of doom could mean making profits, making money off the destruction of our planet, but they're also prophets as in foretelling of doom that is coming if we invest in oil and gas. The Blue Rebels, or the water beings, do performance protests when we want to highlight the need to protect oceans, rivers, wetlands, marshes. Like the Red Rebels, they are silent, using collective movement to demonstrate the deeper, more spiritual call to care for water. Here they are on the banks of the Liesbeek River in view of the Amazon development. This protest was in solidarity with the Liesbeek Action Campaign and First Nation groups that are resisting the development, which is destroying the cultural heritage of this river and its wetland, as well as threatening its ecological integrity. Alongside our protest comes the need to acknowledge the grief of what is being lost. This is Lost Species Day, where last year we held a ceremony on the beach where we honored and remembered the species that have gone extinct. We meet regularly and have strategic workshops where we are mindful of our South African context, examine our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and work out our strategy, and then turn those into tactics and actions. Let's examine our South African context. Here are some important points. The effects of climate change will be more severe here than elsewhere. South Africa is one of the worst greenhouse gas emitters. There's a very low level of climate change awareness amongst our population. The mineral resource lobby has huge influence in politics. Our Gini index is number 1, which means we're the most unequal society in the world. And in terms of protest culture, it's strong in some communities, but actually very, very weak in others. So what are our strategies at the moment? The first is to pressurize politicians with creative protest and civil disobedience actions. Number 2, influence media to change public discourse on climate change. 3, build a national organization developing links with other local exile groups in South Africa. And 4, collaborate with other environmental and climate justice groups. Our current tactics and actions include the following: focusing on Total Energies and the seismic surveys that they're wanting to conduct in Mossel Bay, as well as the East African crude oil pipeline and Standard Bank's investment therein. Also, we build protests around specific significant dates, for example, like Earth Day or World Water Day. We want to be focusing on increasing our reach to young people, other conservation groups, and social justice activists that are not specifically involved with environment. We have ongoing no oil and gas campaigns targeting Gwede Mantashe and the Department of Minerals and Energies, highlighting the need for a faster shift to renewables. And last of all, to be fast and flexible as issues emerge, as opportunities rear themselves, to put together actions that can speak to that. Extinction Rebellion Cape Town is made up of various working groups. There's a core working group, and you can see by the little flames that highlight the groups that are already up and running: an arts and action group, a science and research group, well-being and regenerative culture group, and media and messaging group. The other groups that don't have a flame on it, those tasks are currently covered by the core working group. Here you can see the responsibilities of the core working group, which starts at the overall strategy and coordination of Extinction Rebellion Cape Town. And we translate that into plans, and that is worked out through weekly meetings. And we make sure onboarding takes place, the movement building. We arrange and host climate cafes, and obviously put together the plans for our protest actions. For most of our protest actions, we actually create temporary WhatsApp groups, which any of our members can join, and then you get a feel for how the planning behind the scenes happens. The Arts and Action Group is really the engine behind our performance protest and artivism. This is where creative ideas are birthed. The posters, placards, and banners are made. It's painting and printing, all that kind of stuff. Props are made. There's also a sub WhatsApp group, if I could call it that, for the performers of the Red Rebels and Blue Rebels and Prophets of Doom. So anyone who's interested in trying that out can join this WhatsApp group and get notification when performers are needed. And also we've just started a protest song group where we're just trying to see if we can nourish some songwriting for our protest actions. Our media and messaging group is all about managing our social media, our website, photography, video making, video editing, writing for our press releases and for op-eds that we can submit to newspapers, as well as developing a bigger group of spokespeople. So the last group to be formed is around well-being and developing a regenerative culture within our movement. So this means how can we better provide emotional support to each other at actions, also acknowledging that a lot of us carry eco-anxiety and climate grief, and how can we process that together. And also, as I mentioned earlier, Lost Species Day is a day for honoring and remembering what has been lost. And really, we want to do this because we don't want to be paralyzed by our grief and our loss, but want to process it in a healthy way that then kind of motivates and animates and energizes us towards action and to protect what we love. So that gives you an overview of Extinction Rebellion Cape Town, and you can see where our movement has really started rooting itself and growing. There are some spaces that are still emerging, and there's some spaces that are yet to be developed. But there is a need for everyone to get involved and to be getting involved in different ways. So hopefully giving you this big overview can spark some ideas of where you might fit in. Now that you've heard our XR Cape Town story, can you see how your story can join with our stories?